Please note that this content is targeted for developers, so if you're a SysOps administrator or a solutions architect, you may want to skip over this one. And welcome back to BackSpace Academy. In this lab, we're going to extend our CI/CD pipeline, and we're going to integrate build and test processes into it. And we're going to use AWS CodeBuild to do that. And we're also going to take advantage of the Mocha.js framework so that we can test our code as well and make sure that we're not deploying our Node.js applications with any errors. In our previous lab, we went directly from a GitHub repository through to Elastic Beanstalk, and CodePipeline orchestrated all of that for us, and it works quite well. But to be a true CI/CD pipeline, it needs to have build and testing built into it as well. So what we can do is that we can use CodeBuild and integrate CodeBuild with CodePipeline, and that will look after that building and testing process for us. Now, CodeBuild doesn't actually build as such. What it does, it orchestrates that process, and we define that process for CodeBuild. So in the build stage, we will use npm to look at our package.json file, and that will add those packages and build those packages into our final application that will be deployed to Elastic Beanstalk. Once that has been built, it will then be tested, and we're going to use Mocha and Unit.js to run a simple test on our application. And if it passes that test, then those artifacts or those files that we need to deploy our application will then be handed over to Elastic Beanstalk to deploy our application. Okay, so how does this look? And as we can see here, it's a lot more complicated than simply using CodePipeline to push updates from GitHub to Elastic Beanstalk. There's a lot more going on here, and it's probably beyond the scope of an associate level certification. But that said, this is a very hands-on course, and I want to make sure that you not only pass the exam, but you also are able to apply this knowledge from start to finish without having any missing pieces. Okay, so as before, we have our application code, which will be located inside of our GitHub repository. But we also have a buildspec.yaml file, and that is simply a list of commands that need to be run for AWS CodeBuild to build and test our application. So the way it works is that when we get a change to our GitHub repository, as before, that will invoke AWS CodePipeline, which will then invoke AWS CodeBuild. And AWS CodeBuild will then look at its buildspec.yaml file, and it will start to execute the commands that are listed in that file. So the first lot of commands will be for building our application, because we can't test our application until it's been built. And so they will be, in this example, we'll be using the npm package manager, and that will be installing the packages that are located in our package.json file, which is in our GitHub repository. When our application has been built, and then we have our package directory set up and our built packages within that, then we can hand it over to Mocha. And again, AWS CodeBuild will look at its buildspec.yaml file, and it will install Mocha, and it will run Mocha, and it will also install and run unit.js. What that will do, it will then grab our test.js file that will run tests on our application. If it successfully passes those tests, then AWS CodePipeline will then invoke Elastic Beanstalk to deploy our code. And that code will consist of our application code as before, but it also consists of our built code. So it'll have those packages that were built that were defined in our package.json file.